Right now in your refrigerator, there may be contaminated food you don't know about. This week alone, the CDC announced a recall affecting over 28 million pounds of ground beef across 12 states. Meanwhile, the Cyclospora outbreak now exceeds 9,000 confirmed cases across 38 states. And a new Salmonella strain linked to imported vegetables has hospitalized 47 people in 6 countries. Each pathogen is different. Each food source differs. Each contamination pathway differs. Yet when you trace how all 3 reached millions of people simultaneously, you're not looking at 3 isolated incidents of misfortune. You're looking at a pattern in our modern supply chain that few people have learned to recognize. My name is Dr. William Parker. For the past 18 years, I've worked with adults navigating the exact moment after 65. I want to walk you through what we actually know right now about all 3 outbreaks, what connects them at a structural level that public health agencies rarely explain directly, and what specific practical steps genuinely protect you and your family when multiple foodborne illnesses circulate at the same time. Stay with me through everything today because the 4th point will cover how industrial distribution creates a vulnerability that all 3 outbreaks exploit simultaneously is the piece that changes how you think about this season entirely. The last thing we'll discuss is the one habit that matters more than almost anything else when you're navigating a landscape where the food in your refrigerator could have been in circulation for weeks before anyone noticed it was contaminated. Before we go further, if this kind of calm, fact-checked, real-time public health information is useful to you, go ahead and hit subscribe. This channel exists to give you the information you need during exactly these situations, and it helps more people find it when you do. Before we analyze each outbreak individually, you need one framework. Without it, these 3 crises will feel like 3 unrelated news stories, rather than 3 symptoms of the same underlying vulnerability. I call it the cascading contamination model. Here's what's true about our food supply that most people have never examined closely. First, extreme centralization. A single beef processing facility in Colorado processes and distributes ground beef to restaurants and grocery stores across 15 states in a single week. One produce washing facility supplies pre-cut lettuce to 300+ locations from a single location. One imported vegetable shipment passes through 3 countries before reaching your local supermarket. This centralization cuts costs significantly. It keeps food affordable, but it creates a dangerous vulnerability. When contamination happens at a single point, one facility, one shipment, one processing step, illness spreads silently across entire regions before the first person seeks medical care. Second, the water connection. This is critical. All 3 current outbreaks, the beef's E. coli, the Cyclospora parasite, and the Salmonella in vegetables, trace back to one common factor: contaminated water. Not just water used somewhere in production, water that was inadequately treated, inadequately monitored, or inadequately separated from sewage and animal waste. The specific pathways differ. The organisms are completely different, but the vulnerability is identical: poor sanitation control in agricultural and industrial environments. Third, the invisible timeline. By the time a recall arrives, the contaminated products have typically circulated for weeks. The current E. coli outbreak in ground beef involves illnesses reported as far back as September, yet the recall wasn't announced until this week. The Cyclospora outbreak has been building since early May. The Salmonella in vegetables was only connected this past week. Here's what this means. When you hear about a recall, the food has already been in millions of homes. People have already been exposed. Investigators are responding to illness that occurred, not preventing illness before it happens. The cascade unfolds like this. Contamination occurs at a farm, processing facility, or distribution center. The product is packaged and distributed across multiple states or countries. People consume the food over weeks. Some recover without medical care. Others are tested, but not always with the right test. Investigators identify enough cases with a common link to trigger a recall. And by then, the damage is already done. This is not a failure unique to one company. This is a structural challenge in large-scale production. Understanding this pattern is exactly what helps you protect yourself when multiple outbreaks run simultaneously. Now let's examine each outbreak specifically. Understanding how each pathogen spreads changes what protects you. Outbreak number 1. E. coli in ground beef. Picture a cattle feedlot where thousands of animals are housed in close proximity. E. coli lives naturally in cattle intestines. During slaughter and processing, if there's even minimal contamination of the meat with intestinal contents, the bacteria enters. Modern ground beef processing compounds this. It often combines meat from hundreds of cattle from multiple facilities. If one animal's contamination goes undetected during processing, it distributes to thousands of pounds of final product. The contaminated beef then moves through distribution centers, facilities processing dozens of different products from different sources. If sanitation protocols fail at even one step, bacteria transfers from one product line to another. The critical point: E. coli isn't killed by the temperature at which ground beef is typically cooked to medium, 160 degrees Fahrenheit internally. It requires reaching 160 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the entire product. Undercooked hamburgers, lightly seared ground beef, and rare ground beef preparations all carry meaningful risk with contaminated product. How to identify exposure. E. coli infection typically produces severe, sometimes bloody diarrhea beginning 2 to 8 days after exposure. Fever may or may not be present. The danger with E. coli is distinct. A small percentage of infected individuals, particularly those over 65, develop hemolytic uremic syndrome, a serious condition affecting the kidneys. This doesn't happen to most infected people, but it happens to enough that E. coli is genuinely serious. Current status: 73 confirmed cases across 12 states, 15 hospitalizations. The source is narrowed to ground beef products distributed through specific retailers. Outbreak number 2, Cyclospora in produce. If you followed this channel, you've heard Cyclospora explained before. But this outbreak remains active and still growing, so it's worth revisiting. Cyclospora is a microscopic parasite. Its infectious form, the oocyst, has a tough outer shell that survives for months in water. When irrigation water contaminated with human sewage or animal waste contacts leafy greens, herbs, or soft fruits, these parasites adhere to the surface or penetrate into the produce itself. The key point: standard washing with water does not reliably remove Cyclospora oocysts. The parasite's shell protects it. Heat eliminates it, which is why cooking produce is the only fully reliable protection. Obviously, you don't cook salads. How to identify exposure. Cyclospora has a distinctive pattern. Symptoms begin approximately 7 to 10 days after exposure. You experience watery diarrhea, sometimes explosive and frequent, accompanied by significant fatigue, bloating, and loss of appetite. Fever is typically absent or mild. What's distinctive? Symptoms improve for a few days, then return just as strongly. This relapsing pattern is the clearest signal for Cyclospora. If your doctor only ran stool tests once, they may have missed it. Current status: 9,200 plus confirmed or suspected cases across 38 states. Cases continue being reported. Contaminated irrigation water is the suspected pathway. Outbreak number 3, Salmonella in imported vegetables. This is the newest outbreak, still being investigated. Early tracking suggests Salmonella-contaminated leafy greens imported from a certain region have been distributed to grocery chains and restaurants across 6 countries. Unlike Cyclospora, which comes from water contamination, Salmonella in produce typically traces to either animal waste used as fertilizer or to contaminated water that contacted fecal matter from birds, rodents, or livestock. How to identify exposure? Salmonella produces fever, often 101 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit, nausea, vomiting, watery or bloody diarrhea, and significant abdominal cramping. Symptoms typically begin within 6 to 48 hours of exposure. The rapid onset is a useful diagnostic clue. Why older adults are at higher risk. Here's the physiological reality. Immune function slows with age in a process called immunosenescence. The same bacterial load that a 30-year-old's body contains rapidly may take longer to control in a 70-year-old's body. Additionally, reduced stomach acid production, common with age and associated with long-term proton pump inhibitor use, removes one of the gut's primary defenses. The stomach's acidic environment normally kills a significant proportion of ingested bacteria before they reach the intestine. If you use a proton pump inhibitor regularly for acid reflux, this matters. Not as a reason to stop your medication without your doctor's input, but as a reason to be more vigilant during active outbreak seasons. Current status: 47 confirmed hospitalizations across 6 countries. The source has been narrowed to specific imported produce. Here's where 3 separate crises become one pattern. All 3 outbreaks involve contaminated water at some point in the production or processing chain. E. coli contamination in beef can be introduced through water used in processing facilities or water that contacted animal waste in feedlot environments. Cyclospora reaches produce through irrigation water contaminated with human sewage. Salmonella reaches imported vegetables through water used in washing or processing that was contaminated with fecal matter. These are different organisms, they're different foods, they're different contamination pathways, but the shared vulnerability is identical. Inadequate control of water quality and sanitation in agricultural and industrial environments. What this reveals is profound. 2 people can be exposed to completely different pathogens from completely different foods, and yet both be exposed through the same system failure, poor water sanitation somewhere in the supply chain. This is why public health experts increasingly view multiple simultaneous outbreaks not as coincidence, but as a signal of systemic vulnerability in how we produce and distribute food at scale. And this is exactly why the practical habits you build now matter more during periods when multiple outbreaks are active. I want to walk you through 5 specific targeted actions. Know which products are recalled, understand what cooking eliminates, recognize the symptoms, prepare for potential illness. Build one consistent habit. Action number 1, know which products are recalled. The recall covers ground beef products with specific lot codes distributed to retailers in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, and Montana. If you purchased ground beef at specific retailer names in any of these states in the past 3 weeks, checking the FDA recall database is a 2-minute precaution worth taking. The common mistake assuming stores will notify you or that a news alert will reach you. Stores aren't required to contact individual customers. Most people don't check FDA recall listings proactively. For Cyclospora in produce, implicated products include prepackaged salad mixes, fresh cilantro, fresh parsley, and certain imported berries. If you purchased any of these items in the past month from specific sources, particularly from specific regions, consider whether you've consumed them raw and whether you should check for symptoms. For salmonella in vegetables, imported leafy greens and lettuce products from specific regions are under investigation. Again, the FDA recall database is your reference point. Action number 2, understand what cooking actually eliminates. Ground beef. E. coli dies when ground beef reaches 160 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature throughout the entire product, not just on the surface. A food thermometer removes guesswork. Most people can't judge doneness by appearance alone reliably. Produce, heat eliminates both Cyclospora and Salmonella, but you don't cook salads. So protection here means choosing cooked preparations when practical during active outbreak seasons. Cross-contamination matters. Raw ground beef and raw vegetables contaminate anything they touch: cutting boards, hands, utensils, kitchen surfaces. When preparing ground beef, wash hands thoroughly with soap and water afterward. Clean any surface or utensil that contacted raw beef before using it for other foods. The same applies to produce. Action number 3, know the specific symptoms. E. coli, severe diarrhea, often bloody, abdominal cramps, sometimes fever. Begins 2 to 8 days after exposure. Seek medical care immediately if symptoms are severe. Include blood and stool, or if you develop signs of hemolytic uremic syndrome, severe anemia, low platelet count, kidney dysfunction. Cyclospora, watery explosive diarrhea, significant fatigue, bloating, loss of appetite, typically no fever. Begins 7 to 10 days after exposure. Distinctive relapsing pattern. Seek medical care, and if you've had stool testing, mention that you suspect Cyclospora. Salmonella. Fever, 101 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, watery or bloody, abdominal cramping. Begins 6 to 48 hours after exposure. Seek medical care if symptoms are severe, include blood and stool, or last more than a week. Action number 4. Prepare for potential illness. Have oral rehydration solution on hand. The The primary complication of all three pathogens in older adults is dehydration. Having this available means you're not making a pharmacy run while already feeling unwell. Have a food thermometer. An inexpensive instant read thermometer available at any hardware store removes guesswork from whether your ground beef has reached safe internal temperature. Action number 5. Build one consistent habit. Check the FDA recall database once per week. Spend 2 minutes scanning for products you've recently purchased. That's it. 2 minutes per week is genuinely more protective than a major kitchen overhaul. This habit changes everything. It unifies protection against all three outbreaks simultaneously. During active outbreak seasons, and right now, we're in one, prioritize cooked foods over raw preparations when practical. Not permanently. Not because raw food is inherently dangerous, but because when multiple pathogens circulate through the supply simultaneously, and when contaminated products already reach millions of homes before recalls, cooked preparations eliminate risk that raw preparations don't. This means, for meat, cook all ground beef to 160 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature. Use a thermometer, not visual assessment. For produce, choose cooked lettuce wilted into soups or stir-fries, cooked herbs incorporated into hot dishes, cooked soft fruits in compotes or heated dishes rather than raw versions when practical. For dining out, ask whether the restaurant uses pasteurized eggs in raw or undercooked dishes. Ask whether produce has been cooked. This isn't about avoiding restaurants. It's about being an informed consumer during a specific window when risk is higher. Most importantly, wash hands thoroughly with soap and water after handling any raw animal products or raw produce. This single habit, more than any other, prevents cross-contamination. You don't need to eliminate entire food categories. You need to shift your habits strategically during active outbreak seasons. And the moment we're in right now with 3 simultaneous outbreaks is exactly when this matters most. Before your 30-day challenge, I want to leave you with a tool you can use right now. I call it the Triple Outbreak Clarity Checklist. 5 questions, all actionable today. Question 1. Currently in my home, do I have ground beef purchased from specific retailers in any affected 12 states? If yes, have I checked whether it's covered by the current recall? Question 2. Are you consuming fresh produce implicated in these outbreaks? Check for prepackaged salad mixes, fresh cilantro, fresh parsley, imported berries, or imported leafy greens. If yes, have you been cooking them when practical? Question 3. Do you know the symptom differences? E. coli. Severe bloody diarrhea starting 2 to 8 days after exposure. Cyclospora, relapsing watery diarrhea starting 7 to 10 days after exposure. Salmonella, fever, vomiting, diarrhea starting 6 to 48 hours after exposure. When would you seek medical care? Question 4. Have you had a gastrointestinal illness in the past month that you didn't connect to these outbreaks? Is it worth mentioning to your doctor, particularly if you were never tested? Question 5. Where's the FDA recall database? Can you access it in under 2 minutes? If any question reveals a gap in your awareness, that's completely normal. The goal is closing those gaps this week. Here's your challenge. For the next 30 days, build one specific proactive habit. Week 1. Check the FDA recall database once. Spend 2 minutes scanning for products you've recently purchased. Write down whether you currently have any recalled products at home. Write down which outbreak symptoms you already knew about and which were new. Weeks 2 and 3. Maintain the weekly FDA recall check. Shift 1 meal per day, just one, to include cooked rather than raw produce. If you typically have raw salad for lunch, cook that lettuce into a soup or stir-fry instead. Assess how this shift affects your routine. Week 4. Complete the weekly FDA check again. Revisit your initial answers to the Clarity Checklist. Note what's changed. Commit to one habit you'll maintain beyond the 30 days. You don't need a perfect food safety protocol. You need a consistent one. 2 minutes per week of proactive checking plus one strategic shift toward cooked preparations during outbreak season is genuinely more protective than a major lifestyle overhaul. Here's what I've learned in my years working with your demographic. The difference between healthcare that responds to illness after it happens and awareness that prevents it from happening is profound. Right now, millions of people have contaminated products in their homes and have no idea. They haven't seen the recall announcement. They haven't checked the database. They're consuming food they believe is safe when it isn't. You probably heard about one of these outbreaks or maybe none of them. Food safety news competes with everything else. It rarely gets the clear, calm explanation it deserves. That's not adequate for the people I work with. And it's not adequate for you. You have every right to understand what's circulating right now, what it means for your situation, and what 2 minutes of proactive checking can do to protect you and your family. Start today with the FDA recall database. That's genuinely all it takes to begin. If this gave you something useful, go ahead and subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this calm, honest, real-time public health information without the extremes. If you want a structured guide to integrate this into your health habits, I've linked a free food safety tracker in the description. Thousands in this community use it already. I'll see you in the next one.